점수 잡는 Hackers.
Hello everyone. Welcome back. This is a fresh start of Volume 2 for our new digital SAT math. We're going to get right into Test 1, Module 1. And just as a reminder, this is going to be a fun ride as we have a new set of questions for the math section. So let's get started. Question 1. This is going to be a simple substitution question. If x is going to be the value of 7, what is the value of this expression, absolute value 5 minus x? So let's go ahead and substitute the value of x here, and let's figure that out. Again, we've ended up with a negative 2 within the absolute value sign, and that just means I'll convert that to the positive equivalent, which is positive 2. And so the answer is going to be C. Okay. Okay, on to question 2. If 6 times the expression a minus 4 is equal to negative 10 times the expression a plus 2, what is the value of a over 2? So first, why don't we go ahead and simplify the given equation, and let's get started with that. Okay. In this case, we can get rid of the parentheses by distributing the constant values into the parentheses. Let's first go ahead and combine the constants. So we'll add the 24 to the other side. And let's bring the negative 10a over to the other side. And there we have it so far. So then the value of a is just going to be 1 over 4th, right? Now, this isn't where we need to stop because we have one more step remaining, which is going to be solving for the value of a over 2. In that case, we're going to substitute that into a over 2, which is going to be 1/4 divided by 2, or in that case, 1/4 times the value of 1/2, and that's going to end up being 1 over 8, and so the answer is going to be D. Moving right along to question 3. Jenna paid $1,200 or $1,200 for her studio apartment each month last year. So that's the monthly rent. If the rent was increased by 10%, so it's an increase, this year, so at the end of this year or at a certain time of this year, it increased by 10%, how much will Jenna pay for her apartment each month, starting from the increase of 10%? So let's take a look. So the basic or the current rate, the basic rate of the apartment that we have to start with is the $1,200. First, let's take the 10% of that. And we can convert the 10% into the decimal 0.1 or 0.10. And then 10% of $1,200 or $1,200 is going to be $120. So this value represents the exact amount of increase or the value that was added to the original rent, which is $1,200. So once we add this value, this is going to be $1,320, and so the answer is going to be C. Now, an alternative way of figuring this out is that we can, first of all, get the 10% of $1,200, or we can quickly do a shortcut where we do 1,200 times 1.1, which just means that we've added 10% to the original 100%, and that should also give you this value of 1,320. Great. Question 4. In the figure shown below here, line L at the top is parallel to line M at the bottom, and line P, this line intersects these two parallel lines. What is the value of x? And they're referring to the angle here. just a concept review about transverse lines and, parallel lines. Whenever a line like P intersects two sets of parallel lines, well, first of all, we're given this angle, which is 136 degrees, but also just by visually looking at it, any vertical angles are going to be congruent. So in this case, 136 degree, or this angle here, is going to be exactly equal or congruent to this vertical angle here. And then now with that, so this is going to be 136. And once we have the value of one of these angles, we can always subtract it from the angle value of a straight line, which is going to be 180. And that's going to end up with the 44 degrees. And that means these two angles, which are going to be supplementary, right, is going to be 44 degrees. Okay, perfect. Also, vertical angles are congruent. So congruent to that or vertical to that, which is the angle facing this side over here, is also going to be 44 degrees. Now, with the given set of these four angles, that's, it has these specific values. Let's take a look at what this x is going to represent. Now, just to be a little clear, and let me redraw this on the side over here. Anytime that we have a set of parallel lines and a transverse lines that intersect those, the angles that actually face the same direction. So in this case, this and this angle, they are facing the same direction, or these two yellow angles, which are also facing the same direction, these are going to have the same value, in this case, 44. And so that means this top corresponding angle here, which is actually going to be x, is also 44 degrees. Another way we can think about it is that the internal angles, right? In this case, the internal angle is going to be 136, and the other opposite internal angle, which is going to be x, should also equal a sum total of 180 degrees. So either way, as however we look at it, whether it's going to be the same set of angles facing the same direction, right, same face, or set of the two internal angles that make up 180 degrees, the value of x is going to be 180 minus 136, and therefore the answer is going to be exactly 44. Okay, question 5. At a local restaurant, an appetizer, which is the first menu of the course, costs $10, and an entree, which is like the main middle course, right, costs $20 per plate. If the restaurant sold twice as many entrees as appetizers and the total sales for one day was $600, how many entrees were sold that day? So first, because we have different letters that we can work with, A for appetizer and E for entree, let's use those variables, okay? So A for appetizer, and then E for entree. Okay, great. So given that appetizer costs $10, that's going to be 10A, and an entree, per entree, it's going to cost $20 per plate. And so that gives us, or in this case, a scenario, the total sale, which is going to end up being $600. Now, here's a problem. We have two unknown variables, but just one set of equation, or just one equation. Now, if you look closely at the scenario in the given statement, it says, if the restaurant sold twice as many entrees as appetizers, so that means the entree is actually going to equal 2A, or twice as many appetizers. So then given this relationship, we have another piece of hint that we can use to solve for the values of these variables, right? So then it says asking how many entrees. So ultimately, we are looking for the value of E. But for now, why don't we go ahead and substitute E for 2A, okay? Okay, so there we go. Let's go ahead and simplify this expression. Okay, let's do the math. Great, and so that means A is going to equal 12. Now, this is the number of appetizers that was sold, but the question was asking for how many entrees were sold that day. We did have that one piece of information where it said if the restaurant sold twice as many entrees as appetizers, so given this specific value of appetizer being 12, entree is then going to be twice that, which is going to be 24 plates. So the answer is going to be 24. Okay, great. Let's move on. Question 6. The bar graph shows the number of students participating in different extracurricular activities. So it seems like we have band for music, chess, drama, sports, and art. If one of these students is selected at random, what is the probability that the student is participating in sports? So we are given a specific category, which is sports right here. Before we do that, let's go ahead and find the value of each of these bar graphs, okay? So in the case of band, it seems like it's right in between 8 and 10, which is going to be 9. In the case of chess, in between 10 and 12, so it's going to be about 11. Drama, right around 7. Sports, again, 5, right around in between 4 and 6, which is 5. And then art, right at 8. And so these are the exact values. Now, at that point, we have the individual values, but anytime that we need to solve for a probability, we also need to have the total value, right? So let's go ahead and add these up. Okay. So that means we have a total of 40 students participating in this survey of extracurricular activities. Now, because the question is asking about sports, the corresponding value of sports is going to be 5. So that means if we choose those 5 students at random, that means we have 5 out of 40 as a probability. We can simplify this down to 1 over 8, and that's going to be the answer A. Now, just make sure sometimes when we solve for probabilities, they do leave the answer in fraction, or sometimes again, right? Probability is usually expressed as a percentage, but if given the multiple answer options, just always look for the same form of the answer, okay? Moving on to question 19. If the equation of the parabola shown in the xy plane takes the form of y is equal to ax squared plus bx plus c, a very typical quadratic equation there, what are the solutions to the equation? Now, one way that we can just find the solutions to the equation by looking at the graph would be the point of x-intercept, okay? So here we have number 1 and number 2 here. Now, if you just take a look at the x value just visually, then it seems like the x coordinate should be somewhere around 2.5 or the middle of 0 and 5, okay? Where at the x-intercept, the y value is going to be 0. And somewhere here, it seems like similarly it's going to be in between, middle of 5 and 10, around 7 to 7.5, okay? Now, these are going to be estimates because I'm just using my naked eye to judge what's given on the graph, right? Okay, well, let's take a look now. In this case, we have the vertex, which is 5, negative 5, okay? So if the vertex is 5, negative 5, we can probably use a generic form of the parabolic graph to find the actual equation, and that is going to be okay, that's the generic form that you can memorize, and hk is going to be the vertex of the parabola. So in this case, if we can rewrite this as 5 for h and then negative 5 for k, okay, and from this point onwards, we can substitute any of these other coordinates to solve for the value of a. So let's do that. So I'm going to use this left coordinate here. Okay, keep simplifying. Okay, and it seems like if I move everything around, a is just going to be my 1. Okay, now, once we have this, I'm just going to come back up here and then plug in 1 for a, or just leave it at that, right? Okay, now, if this is going to be the function, right, of this parabola, and all we have to do is solve for the values of x when y is going to equal 0. That's exactly that. So let's go ahead and expand this out. Okay, I'm just going to combine the constants. And there we have it. Now, unfortunately, this is not going to be factorable because any pair of factors for 20 is not going to give me a combination sum or a difference of 10. So in this case, I'm going to have to use a quadratic formula. So A is going to be 1, B is going to be negative 10, and C is going to be positive 20, right, as given back in this question. Okay, so with that, let's just go ahead and review our quadratic function. So let's take the quadratic function over here. So always have the quadratic formula memorized to solve for complicated equations like that. So then B is going to be negative 10, right? Anytime that we see A is going to be 1, and then C is going to be positive 20. So let's go ahead and simplify this with the given constants. Okay, let's keep doing the work here. Now, within the square root, right, this is going to be 100 minus 80, so I'm just going to simplify that to 20, which actually can be rewritten as 4 times 5, right? And the reason why I'm wanting to focus on 4 is that that's a square root, a perfect square. So, perfect square of 4 times 5 is going to be equal to root 2 root 5, okay? Okay, so all in one step, I've simplified that. Over, let's not forget the denominator. So in this case, we can also further simplify this fraction because 10 divided by 2 would be 5 at the top. And then this can cancel, then we can actually get rid of this whole denominator. Great. Okay, so this is what my x is going to be after using the quadratic formula. Now, if you come over here, that's going to be the exact answer D. And that is indeed correct. But then just as a reminder, before we actually go through all this math, if you look visually at the graph, right, this first coordinate is going to be between, like I said, 0 and 5, closer to 2.5. And indeed, 5 minus root 5 is going to be around 2.5. And then similar to this second coordinate, which I said was going to be closer to about 7 or 7.5, that is the 5 plus root 5. So this is going to be 5 minus root 5, where this is going to be 5 plus root 5. So if you are familiar with the actual value, root 5, then you could have just gotten the answer D just by looking at the graph. But I wanted to show you the graph and the mathematical work dealing with quadratic formula because it was going to be a good review for us, right? Great, let's move on. Okay, on to question 20. The function P gives the value of an investment that it increases at a constant annual rate of 7%. Again, anytime that you see a percent change, exponential. If the value of the investment is $10,000 today, which of the following functions best models the value of the investment in T years, I'm guessing from today, where the initial value of the investment is constant K? Okay. So let's take a look. Well, first, it's going to increase at a rate of 7% annually. So annually just means per year. Now, we can express 7% as 0.07, but because it's going to be an increase, we're going to add this to 1, and that gives us 1.07. Now, this is going to be an exponential increase. For an exponential decrease, just as a reminder, we're going to have to subtract the rate from 1, okay? But because for now this is an exponential increase, we're not going to consider the exponential decline. So then, given that, right, T is going to be the investment in T years, okay? And then finally, they say that the initial value of the investment was K. So actually, the initial value of the investment was not 10,000. If K was not given, then you can assume that maybe today's the starting point, but they have clarified that it's going to be K. That means this model is going to be K, which is the initial, right? And then we're supposed to use our rate of change, because this is going to be exponential increase. We're going to add that actual 7% to 1 to make it 1.07, and that's going to be to the t power, okay? So the answer is going to be A in this case, okay? Because this models exactly that. Now, again, if 10,000 were the starting point, then instead of K, we would use 10,000 here, right? Which would look like this. But again, because they didn't really specify whether 10,000 today was the starting point or not, and in fact, they give us the constant K to use, the answer was K. Okay, moving on to question 21. The function f is defined by f of x is equal to x minus 3 squared plus 8. In the xy plane, the graph of y, so a different function, g of x, is the result of translating this graph, y is equal to f of x, 7 units to the left, okay, and 4 units down. Okay, so which equation defines this function? So let's take the original function, f of x here. Now, let's take a look at this very first translation here. So if we move or shift the graph 7 units to the left, remember, the generic form of that would be that we're supposed to add 7 units or 7 to the value of x. So that would look like this. Okay, so x plus 7 would be 7 units to the left translation. So all we have to do is for any time that we see x, we're going to add x plus 7. Okay, so that's the first after the first translation. Now for the second, we're going to shift this down by 4 units. Anytime that we move across the y-axis, that's going to be just a subtraction, or in this case, because it was 4 units down, minus 4 to the f of x. So that means in this case, let's come back here. All we have to do is just add the minus 4. And then voila, that is going to be our final form of the equation. So let's go ahead and take a look. Why don't we actually just simplify everything? And then once we combine the constants, it would just be this. So x plus 4 squared plus 4 after going through all the translation. And so the answer is going to be B. And just let's not forget, this is a g of x, not f of x, right? The new graph. So x plus 4 squared plus 4, check, and that is exactly correct. Okay, so on to our last question for Module 2. The function f is given if g of x is equal to f of x plus 1. Remember, in the previous question, we saw that anytime that we add this value, it's going to be a y-axis or vertical shift. In this case, it seems like it's a vertical shift up by 1 unit. Which table gives 3 values of x and their corresponding values of g of x? Okay, so we have f of x and we have g of x, which is going to be f of x shifted up by 1 unit. Okay, now one way, right, so it says 3 values of x and their corresponding values of this g of x. So this is going to be g of x. Now why don't we do this? Why don't we start with one of these x given values. So we have -1, 2, and 4 as an option. I'm going to say I want to use -1 for x here, okay? So in the case of f of x, which is given by this function, let's plug in -1 for every x that we see here, okay? It's going to be -1 minus 1. Okay, so let's go ahead and simplify this. Okay. Okay, and then this will equal positive 16. Now, with 16, what we can do is we can then plug in, or g of x is going to be this, the result of f of x, which is going to be 16, from f of -1 plus the 1. So if we add plus 1 here, that means g of x is going to be 17, okay? So while f of -1 was 16, g of negative 1 is going to be 17, right? So let's take a look. Which one of these charts give us that corresponding value? And if we do just x of negative 1, that means B is the only chart that gives you 17. And again, we were able to get that by first solving for f of x and then using that little shift or translation, right? Adding 1 to the f of x, and that would have given me g of x. And therefore, the only possible answer, because we just tested negative 1 for x, that's going to be B. You could have done the same by testing 2 or 4. Again, going through the same process, adding 2 for x or putting 4 for x. And then once we solve for f of x, all we have to do was just add the positive 1, right, to the f of x, which gives you the g of x, okay? So in this case, the answer is going to be B. All right, so that wraps up test 1 for volume 2 for the digital SAT math. Just as I noticed, there were a little bit more advanced math questions than usual of the distribution, but regardless of the content domain, always check which of these areas are going to be your weaknesses, which are your strengths, and for the strengths, you can put them aside and then focus a little bit more on your weaknesses. So I'll see you later in test 2. Hey everyone, how are y'all doing? Welcome back to test 2, module 1 of our digital SAT volume 2. So without any further introductions, let's get started right away. Okay, question 1. Off to an easy start. If x squared minus 7 is equal to 25, what is the value of x squared plus 4? So in this case, let's take the first equation and then solve for the value of x. At this point, you might be wondering, we can take the square root of both sides and find the value of x. And let's get that started. However, and by the way, this is not a perfect square, so this might require some sort of calculation or a device help to solve for the actual value of square root of 32. But you might be thinking, if you look over here, the expression already also includes x squared. So without even going to this next step, why don't we just plug in 32 for x squared and add that 4, and then that's the answer. So there we have it. The answer, the final answer to this question is going to be 36, and it is indeed. So let's move on. Okay, question 2. Janet saves $50 per week, and her husband Todd saves $70 each week. Now, per week and each week, right, the same expression there. So Janet does $50 per or each week, while her husband Todd does $75 each week or per week. How many weeks will it take for Janet and Todd together to save for a vacation that will cost $1,500 together? So in this case, one other hint that we need to take note of is that they're asking for how many weeks together, which means the number of weeks for Janet and for Todd is going to be the same. So why don't we use the expression or variable W for weeks? And with that, we can get the expression for Janet, which is going to be $50 per week, so 50 times W. And we're going to add Todd's rate, which is going to be 75W. And that's going to equal the total cost for them, which is going to be $1,500. In this case, again, the question is asking for the number of weeks, and so solve for the value of W. Okay, let's get that started. So before I simplify this down, right, make sure that you understand this equation. So in this case, again, that's the total, and that is going to be the sum of both Janet and Todd's number of money that they earn for every week. And with that, all we have to do is mathematically find 1,500 over 125, and that is going to equal 12. Perfect. Let's move on. Okay, question 3. The bar graph shows the number of students in a physics class and the length of time spent studying yesterday. Okay, how many students spent less than 4 hours studying yesterday? So let's take a look. On the x-axis, which is going to be our independent variable, it says length of time spent studying. Now, what I mean by independent variable is that it's going to be a factor that we can, decide to group students. So in this case, we've decided to group students by the number of hours spent studying yesterday, right? So it says yesterday. So in this case, the number of hours or the number of students who spent studying yesterday for 1 hour would be 8. Again, for this category, for 2 hours yesterday, it's going to be 12. For 3 hours yesterday, 18. And 4 hours, 10. And for 5 hours, 4. As you can see, it's kind of like a bell curve distribution, right? Now, before we get any of the other axes analyzed, why don't we go ahead and take the total of all of these numbers to see how many students were surveyed for this study. Okay, so take the sum of the number of the group of students in each of the category. And again, if you think about it, there's not going to be a repeat. Meaning, if a student fell into this category 4 hours spent yesterday, they're not going to be counted again in any of the other groups, right? So there's no repeats here. So this comes out to a total of 52, meaning there are 52 students that were surveyed total for the survey. Now, let's take a look at the actual question. How many students spent less than 4 hours studying yesterday? So less than 4 hours. So we're not going to include the category of 4 and 5 hours because they do not fall into this less than 4 hours. Now, if you were to mathematically express less than 4 hours, it would be this inequality symbol less than and 4. So it's going to include the first 3 groups. That's going to include the 8, the 12, and the 18, right? So in this case, it's going to be, so 38 number of students that fall into that category. At the end of the day, it's going to be, so how many students spent less than 4 hours studying yesterday? But remember, here's a caveat. Normally, if you were to take a probability, we would do the count, which is 38 divided by 52. But in this case, they're not asking for the probability. All they're asking for is that actual total number in the raw form. So the answer is just going to be 38 without the total. So the answer is 38. Great. On to question 4. Charlie ordered a pizza from a restaurant that charges $12 for a pizza plus 0.5 or 50 cents for each additional topping. If his total bill was $18.50 or $18.50, how many additional toppings did he add to his pizza? Okay, so, and it says assume there's no extra delivery fee or tax. That's good to know. Now, taking that scenario, let's go ahead and write this in terms of the mathematical expression. So there's going to be a flat price of $12. And then it's going to be 0.5 for each additional topping. And I'm going to use T for the topping. Okay, so $12, the flat rate, plus 0.5 times T. And that's going to cost, right, the total bill, 18.5. Okay, and so the question was, how many toppings did he add? Now, at this point, all we have to do is just combine and solve for the value of T. Okay, we're almost there. If we divide both sides by 0.5, which is going to be the 50 cents, then we'll get the number of toppings. And this will be equal to 13. Now, if you think about it, the question was how many additional toppings, right? In other words, just how many toppings did he add total? Because without these additional toppings, the pizza would have just costed him $12, which seems to be about like a small, right, to a medium-sized pizza. But then I guess on top of that, he added 13 additional toppings to make the pizza tastier, right? And that costed him an additional 50 cents or 0.5 per topping. And with that, with a total of $18.50, we were able to get that the additional toppings he added was 13 overall. Okay. Question 5. For the linear function g of 4 minus g of 3 is equal to 0.5, and g of 2 is negative 4. Which equation defines g of x? Now, let's put these pieces of information together, okay? So we have g of 4 and g of 3. That's equal 0.5, okay? Now, we're not given the actual values of g of 4 or g of 3 individually, but just their difference, which is going to equal 0.5. We are given g of 2, which is going to equal negative 4. So I guess what we can do is we can start with this piece of information, because we now have this exact value of g of 2, which is expressed as negative 4. And then with that, what I would suggest is we can probably choose which of these equations we can eliminate based off of this information. And then finally, we can use this second piece of information to get to the right answer. So in that case, let's go ahead and start with A. Okay, so all we have to do is just plug in 2 for the value of x. And this is indeed equal to negative 4. So we're going to save A. Now, if you do a quick math, the reason why I chose A as a strategy was that the fraction had the denominator 2. And already from here, right, as you can see, this is a very easy cancellation. So why don't we use the same strategy and see if we can evaluate any other equations here. So C and D seems to work, right? But again, what's really interesting is that we already confirmed that A works, right? Through this math of solving for g of 2, which is equal to negative 4. Now, that means our A, which has 1/2 x minus 5, is definitely a possible answer. But if you look at C and D, these have different fractions. While the negative 5 remains the same, this one has 3/2, this one has negative 1/2. So already from that, we know that C and D is not going to be the answer because we already confirmed that A is our answer. Now, let's go ahead and double check B in this case. Similarly, negative 5, right, which is, the same as a constant in all of these, but then the fraction turns out to be different. It's negative 2 over 5. Regardless of actually doing the work or not, because we are kind of already proved that A is the only one that fits this piece of information, without even checking the answer is going to be A, okay? So sometimes going through the elimination without, again, really going through what the question's asking definitely also helps getting to the right answer. So take that into consideration, okay? Okay, question 6. Which of the following is equivalent to the given expression that's given here? It seems like it's a product of two fractions with the very complicated looking group of the exponents and all these products. Now, before we take a look at the answers, why don't we do a little bit of simplification here, okay? So for example, we see a to the 4th, a to the 3rd, and a down here, okay? And in fact, we can probably cancel those because the top has a to the 4th, the bottom has a to the 3rd and a. But you know from your rule of exponents, you can first of all combine these. If the base is the same as a, you can add the sums or get the sum of the exponent, which is a to the 4th, and that's exactly the same as the numerator, right? So all of these will cancel out, so none of the a's will be left in our final answer. So in that case, for example, we can eliminate b, d, and c. So already without doing any further math, our answer is going to be A. But let's just keep going just to confirm. Now let's take a look at B. So in the top here, we have b to the negative 3 power, b to the minus 2, and b here. So I'm just going to take all the b's out. Again, as a review of our rule of exponents, you can make these numbers, the exponents, into the opposite, or in this case, the positives and positives, by switching their place in the fraction. So if I bring this down into the denominator, this will become b to the 3rd, positive 3. And if I bring this up to the numerator, this will become b to the positive 2. So why don't we do that? Okay, let's keep going with the addition of the exponents. So this is what we're left with. And again, with the rule of exponents, we can take the difference in the case of a fraction and this would be b to the minus 2 power, or 1 over b squared. Again, we did confirm earlier, based on our exponent for a, that because in the final answer we're not going to have any of the a's left, the answer choice A is going to be answer. And again, that also is true because we did say b squared is in the denominator, and that is indeed in the denominator. So without further ado, A is going to be our answer. You can also double check just by making sure that these constants, right, we still have the 56 times 54 over 9 times 7. And if you simplify that, you will definitely get 48 for sure. Okay. Question 7. The table shows some values of the linear function f of x. What is the value of f of 4? So now let's take a look. If you look at the x values here, we don't have 4 in the chart. So 4 is going to be left with a question mark, unfortunately. And then f of x, same thing. The only values that are given are going to be corresponding to -6, -2, and then 8. Now, because it says it's a linear function, we can actually set up a formula for this graph. So in this case, this is considered -6, -12. This is -2, 4. And this is 8, 44. The first step would be to solve for the slope, right? Okay, let's solve for the slope. And as always, change in y over change in x. So maybe we can take the top two and then solve for the slope. I'm going to take the second point and then subtract the first point from that. So 4 minus -12, -2 minus -6. So slope is going to be 4, okay? Now, when it comes to y-intercept, let's take a look. With the given slope, we can set this is equal to where the slope was going to be 4, and then we're still left with the unknown y-intercept and then these two coordinates. Let's just take the second point again and then put -2 for x and 4 for y and then solve for b. Okay, again, solve for b this way. So b is going to be +12, which is the y-intercept. So let's put this all together. In fact, bring this over here. So the graph, the coordinates, right, that the linear function make up of, it's going to be represented by the y is equal to 4x plus 12. Now, that's not the last step. The question is asking what is the value of f of 4, okay? Let's go over here. We're going to plug in 4 for x, okay? So the answer is going to be 28, and that's going to be the y coordinate value that corresponds to the x coordinate 4. In other words, it's going to be 4 for 28, so the answer is 28 for the y coordinate value of f of 4. Okay. Moving on to question 8. It's a geometry question with a right triangle. It says for a right triangle R as t shown with the right angle at t, which of the following is equivalent to sine of angle R? Which is going to be here, so sine of angle R. But now if you take a look at the answer options, it seems like they're also going to be dealing with trig of not just angle R, but also of angle S. Okay, so before we get started, let's go ahead and simplify these edges, or label these edges again. So I'm going to call this C, I'm going to call this A, and this will be my B, okay, just for simplification. Now, let's come back here, and because we're dealing with sines and cosines and tangents, let's think of trig functions for right triangle, okay? Okay, so which is going to be the sine, is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. This is adjacent over, this should be h, hypotenuse. And then finally, opposite over adjacent. Okay, now given that, let's take a look. So sine of R is going to be opposite over a hypotenuse of the r. So opposite would be b, and the hypotenuse would be c. So this would be so b over c. So then coming over here, we want to find an expression that matches b over c. Okay, so start with a. So tangent of s. So tangent of s would be opposite over adjacent. So opposite of s is going to be a, over adjacent is going to be b. So for this, tangent of a is going to be a over b. Okay. Now, that's not quite the same as b over c, right? So it's not going to be a. Let's take a look at cosine of r. Again, cosine of r is going to be adjacent over hypotenuse, which is going to be a over c. Okay, which is not quite the same as b over c, so it's not going to be the letter b either. Now let's take a look at c, sine of s over tangent of s. So again, sine of s is going to be opposite over hypotenuse, which is going to be a over c. So let me actually write that down. Okay. Over tangent of s, right? We still have to do this tangent of s. So tangent of s is going to be opposite over adjacent. So opposite over adjacent. So a over b. Okay. Now, if you were to simplify this, this would be, and what do you know? That is exactly equivalent to the expression sine over r. So in fact, the answer is probably going to be, right, C. Now, you can continue to do the same steps and solve or simplify the cosine of r over tangent of r, but during the actual exam, you wouldn't have to go further than C because you found your answer right there, because these two equations are, or expressions are equivalent to each other, okay? All right, moving on to question 9. Okay. The mean height of 5 students in a gym class is 5 feet and 2 inches. When the height of a 6th student is included, the mean height of the 6 students, so the sum of all 6 students, and the mean of that is going to be 5 feet and 1.5 inches. What is the height of the 6th student? Okay, so first let's take it step by step. So the question is saying the mean height of 5 students in this gym class is 5 feet. So we have, for example, a certain number, right? The sum of all the heights of all 5 students divided by 5 is going to be 5 feet and 2 inches. Okay, so 5 feet and 2 inches. Now, when the height of the 6th student is included, so the sum of that plus a 6th student, the mean of that is going to be a little different, which is 5 feet and 1.5 inches. So what I can do is I can multiply both sides by 5 here. Okay. And then solve for, well, the sum of this, A, B, C, D, E, is going to be 5 times 5 feet and 2 inches. But for now, why don't we go ahead and convert everything to inches first, just to be working with the same unit. So 5 feet and 2 inches. Now, 1 foot equals 12 inches. So if we do 5 feet times 12, that's going to give us the total inches. So 60 plus 2 is going to be 62, okay? That means I'm just going to rewrite this. This is going to be 62, okay? Now, 62 times 5 is going to be the sum of all the 5 students. But then we have the 6th student over here, plus F. I'm going to designate F as the 6th student, and that is going to be, the new mean is going to be 5 feet and 1.5 inches. And again, let's just use inches for now. It's going to be 60, but plus 1.5, 61.5. Okay, so there we go. Now the question was, what is the height of the 6th student? Or in other words, what is F? Okay. Okay, and then we can 62 times 5, so let's continue the work here. That means F is going to be 61.5 times 6, minus 62 times 5. So if you plug this into the calculator, this should give you the height in inches, okay? And then finally, so once this is given in inches, we want to convert this back to the feet, right? So then in this case, we would have to do this divided by 12, and that should give you the feet with the remaining inches, okay? And that is going to be the answer B. Okay, so 4 feet and 11 inches. And again, how did we get that? That number, so 4, so after doing the 61.5 times 6 minus 62 times 5 divided by 12 should give you 4 feet first, plus the remaining 11 inches, okay? Now, the biggest strategy here for this question was to realize that once you have the sum and the mean, right, equation from the first scenario, knowing that we can actually just add the sixth member, which is f, and then divide that new number by 6, and then given that new average, or in this case the mean, we can solve for the value of f, okay? All right, here's the work, and it's ready to move on. Okay. Question 10. Which of the following is equivalent to the given expression? Okay, so it seems like there's some simplifications that we can do here, so let's go ahead and get that done. So in the top, we can probably factor out 3x. That's the common factor for both of the terms. So if we do that, then this ends up being x minus 5. Great. And then for the bottom, let's think about whether we can factor this. I'm thinking of the combination of factors for 10, 5, and 2, because then I could get the sum of 7. Okay, but then just as a, as a caution, we're actually dealing with x cubic or x to the third power. So I'm just going to take out x here. Okay, great. Now normally if this was x squared minus 7x plus 10, then we would just be left with these two, product of these two expressions. But then because there's this extra x, I factor that out, and then this is still x minus 5 times x minus 2. Okay, now all we have to do is, cancel. So x minus 5 in the top and the bottom, and then we'll cancel x top. So this is left with, so 3 over x minus 2, and so the answer is going to be equivalent to that, B. Okay, move on to question 5. It's a question of the graph. What is an equation of the graph shown? So let's take a look. This is a linear line, so linear graph that has a negative slope, right? Because it's facing downward towards this quadrant. So it's a negative slope. Okay, so with that two pieces of information, let's get started. If you look at the forms of the answer, A, B, C, D, it seems like the graph function is given in the slope-intercept form of the graph, okay? So in that case, let's first find the slope of the graph. This is going to be change in y over change in x. So before that, let's choose two coordinate pairs. Why don't I choose the y-intercept? Because it falls nicely at the vertex. This is going to be 0, 2. And another point that we can choose can be here, 1, negative 1. Actually, we've been always using the, the form of the change in y over change in x math to figure out the slope, but why don't we use the graph this time to figure the slope out? So in this case, if we start from here, change in y going to the second coordinate pair would be 1, 2, 3. So negative 3 down, and then 1, positive 1 unit to the right. So in this case, the slope is going to be change in y, which is negative 3, over change in x, which is going to be positive 1. That means the slope is going to be negative 3. Perfect. You could have gotten the same slope by doing 2, right? Change in y, 2 minus negative 1, and 0 minus 1. But visually doing it like this by counting the number of spaces, unless these two pairs are really far apart, I think this is also another nice way to kind of take the shortcut. So once we have the slope, then we now know that the y-intercept is, going to be 0, 2, because we figured that out anyway. So in the form of the graph is going to be in this form where mx, so m is the slope, b is a y-intercept. So negative 3x plus 2, and that's going to correspond to answer D. Okay, question 6. At a fundraising event, 120 individuals attended, and everyone except 20 people purchased a single raffle ticket. Okay? The winner of the raffle was chosen at random from among all those who purchased the tickets. What is the probability that Sarah, who attended the event and purchased a single raffle ticket, will be selected as the winner of the raffle? So let's take a look. So there were a total of 120 individuals. Okay. Now it says everyone except 20. The phrase everyone except 20 means out of 120 minus 20, that would be 100. So everyone except 20 would be 100 people. They purchased a single raffle ticket. So single raffle ticket means there's no doubles or triples or no repeats. So each of the 100 people, the members, only has one raffle ticket. The winner of the raffle was chosen at random, okay, from among those who purchased the ticket. So the 100, okay? This is a new total going from 120 to 100. So minus, right, except the 20 who did not purchase the ticket. Now, Sarah, right, is going to be one of those, the members of the group that falls in the 100 because she did purchase this ticket, right? She purchased a single raffle ticket. Now, if she is selected at random, then what's her probability? So the answer is going to be 1 out of this new total and not that total. So the answer is going to be B. Now, unless the question is asking out of all the number of people, right, who just attended the fundraising event, in that case, the total will be 120. But because we're only talking about among those who purchased the raffle ticket, what's her probability of winning? And that's going to be out of those who purchased a single raffle ticket. Okay? Okay, question 7. Keith went to a copy store to print out a manuscript. The copy store charged $10 for the first 100 pages printed and 5 cents per page for every page over 100. If Keith was charged a total of $12.40, how many pages did Keith print? So what this is saying is that for the first 100 pages, so let's say whether, Keith prints 50 pages or 60 pages or even 2 or even 10 pages, so any number of these pages, he's going to be charged $10 no matter what. So up until 100 pages, right, he's always charged $10 for that first 100 pages. Now, after that, he's charged this additional rate of 5 cents per page. But if you take a look at the total first, $12.40, sometimes you might be wondering, well, what if he just printed 60 pages, right, or a number of pages that's fewer than 100? That means he's only going to be paying $10 flat. But because this is greater than $10, he did print extra pages beyond 100. So let's take a look. So we have this flat fee, $10 plus. Now, what is 5 cents in the dollar sign, right? Remember, so cents and dollars are totally different units because $1 is going to be 100 cents. That means we're going to have to express a cent. If it's 5 cents, it's going to be 0.05, okay? So now, in this case, we're going to add the 0.05 rate times, I'm going to designate P as the variable for the number of pages. But then in this case, there's a little bit of caveat. For example, let's say if he printed 120 pages, right? This has to be divided into 100 pages plus the extra 20 pages beyond the 100. So let's just say if his total number of pages was 120, this P that we're adding to the 0.05 is not going to be 120 because remember, he already paid $10 for the first 100 pages. So it's got to be 120, right, minus 100 in this case, and that's going to give him the 20. Or in other words, what we'll do is we'll leave P, and for now, let's say the total cost is going to be 12.4. But again, this P is going to be, right, the total number of pages minus 100. So okay, so this is how you want to write that in for the value of P. Now, all we have to do is we're going to simplify this expression and then solve for the value of P. So I'm going to expand the equation. So 10 plus 0.05P, 0.05 times 100 is going to be 5. Okay, let's add the constants. Then subtract 5 from this, which will give me 7.40. And then finally at the end, we're going to have to divide this by the rate, which is 0.5. Great. That means P is going to be $7.40 divided by the 5 cents, or 0.05. And once you plug this into the calculator, you will get this value of 148. Again, just going back to the scenario, okay? So if he decided to print 148 pages, he's going to have to pay $10 for the first 100 pages, okay? So for the first 100 pages, that was the $10. And then for the 48 extra pages, he paid 5 cents, okay? 0.05. So 0.05 times 48 would give me that extra value, and that's probably going to be equal to $2.40, okay? And this is why his total was $12.40, okay? So the biggest thing to realize for this question without getting it wrong would be the step here, where you think, we have to subtract the actual value of P minus 100 to multiply that by the actual rate, 5 cents per page, beyond 100 pages, okay?
토익은 해커스, 영어도 해커스, 고득점 메이커스, 만점을 받아 버렸어. 토익은 해커스, 영어도 해커스.